Chapter 17 of Intermediate Accounting 1 of Valids and Investment in Associate. So, ito ay third part ng financial instruments or yung financial assets kasi nasa asset side tayo. Asset side tayo. Ang investment in associate, so meron tayong importante dito yung percentage ng shares na hawak mo as investor. Kung meron kang significant influence, kung umabot ka sa 20% threshold, yan. In this chapter, dapat ang outcome natin is maintindihan natin kung ano yung intercorporate share investment, ano yung significant influence na tinatawag, almost influence, parang yung mga influencer sa internet. So identify the factors that indicate significant influence. Kung baga hindi porke naka 20%, yun lamang yung ating way na magkaroon ng significant influence sa ating company na ininvestan natin. Then i-understand natin yung equity method of accounting sa equity investment. Since this is an equity investment, yung shares ang binili natin, generally ang gagamitin natin is equity method. Yan. Di ba yung isa equity tsaka cost method? So, since ito ay nasa equity side tayo nung ating ininvestan, mas appropriate ang gamitin natin is equity method. Meaning of intercorporate share investment, it is the purchase of the equity shares of one entity by another entity. So, pwede namang individual din. So, ang entity kasi is general. Yan. Bumili tayo ng shares kay company A, tapos tayo si company B. O let's say generally si corporation A, si corporation B, parehas silang may stocks. Tapos si company B, bumili kay company A ng stocks. So, lumalabas, si company B ay shareholder din ni company A, diba? So, parang owner na din si company B ni company A. Owner siya. Yan. So, in other words, it is a case of one entity investing in another entity through the acquisition of share capital. The entity may purchase enough shares, an entity may purchase enough shares of another entity in order to exert significant influence over the financial and operating policies of the investee entity. So, importante dito yung word na investee. Kapag investee, yan yung binilhan ng stocks. Ininvestan natin. Tayo yung investor. Okay? Investor tsaka investee, matatakil ninyo yan throughout this discussion. Ano pa ba dyan? So, ibig sabihin din ng paragraph na yan, si company B, kahit sa simula, bumili lang siya ng 1 share. So, medyo mounty lang yon, immaterial na si company A, meron siyang 10,000 share. Bumili siya ng 1 share lang. And then, sabi ni company B, parang maganda yung business ni company A. Ang gawin natin, let's make a plan to buy additional shares, yan, purchase enough shares para sa susunod na periods, meron na tayong significant influence sa pagmamanage ng kanilang financial at operation. Yan, so minsan, basta ma-reach yung 20%, yung kasi yung madalas threshold, automatically kasama na sa decision making si company B, yung representative ni company B, sa meeting ni company A. Okay, significant influence. This is the power to participate in the financial and operating policy decisions of the investee but not control and joint control over those policies. So ito, yung significant influence, magpa-participate ka lang sa paggawa ng desisyon based sa polisiya. Hindi kasama dyan yung makokontrol mo na si company A dahil, let's say, parang pangit yung inyong policy sa pagbebenta, baguhin natin, wala kang power na ganun. Ang kaya mo lang is to participate in the decision making. Tapos hindi rin ikaw lang yung magdedesisyon. Kasi meron dyang word na participate. So pag ang meaning, halimbawa ay what is the meaning of significant influence? Ang maisip mo agad is to participate. Tapos kung anong ipaparticipate niya, decision making or decisions. Ang decision is both financial and operating. Parehas siya kasali. Tapos hanggang participation lang siya, kaya in-specify na hindi kasama ang control sa policies. If the investor holds directly or indirectly through subsidiaries 20% or more of the voting power of the investee, it is presumed that the investor has significant influence unless it can be clearly demonstrated that this is not the case. So if the problem is silent and na-compute natin na si Company B is meron ng 2,000 shares out of 10,000 shares ni Company A, si Company B meron ng significant influence. Pero pag sinabi sa problem na but Company B waives its significant influence over Company A. So parang ibig sabihin ka na ng waive is pinaubaya na niya na hindi siya kasali sa decision making, na wala siyang significant influence although may 20%. Pero again, if the problem is silent, pag nagkaroon na siya ng 20%, meron na siyang significant influence or more. Tapos importante dyan yung word na voting power of the investee. Ito naman, investee again, na daanan uli natin. Ang voting power, ibig sabihin, yung shares lang na nabili natin is common shares. Kasi kung babalikan natin si Accounting 102, si preference shares, wala siyang voting power. Non-voting shares, no? Conversely, if the investor holds directly or indirectly through the subsidiaries less than 20% of the voting power of the investee, it is presumed that the investor does not have significant influence unless such influence can be clearly demonstrated. May tinatawag ditong subsidiary. Okay, paano yung subsidiary, ma'am? 'Di ba? Hindi ko sure kung kayo ay nasa advanced accounting na sa subsidiaries is merong parent and merong subsidiary. Okay? Let's say si Company X is parent siya ni Company Y. So nasa baba si Y. Si Y is subsidiary. Ngayon si Y, bumili siya ng shares kay Z. Tapos doon lumalabas na if the investor, so si Company X, directly or indirectly through subsidiaries, through Company Y, nagkaroon siya ng voting power kay Company Z. So ito ay si X, ito si Y, ito si Z. So parang kaya siya indirectly or directly, merong way, meron tayong meron tayong dinaanan bago nakabili tayo kay Company Z. So galing siya kay Company Y. Ngayon, paano siya naging directly, indirectly? Kapag directly, so si Company X, bumili directly or diretsa or siya yung nakipag-transact kay Company Z. Pero yung transaction na yon is hindi mangyayari kung wala sa research or sa tulong ni Company Y. Kapag naman indirectly, si Company Y yung bumili. Okay? Sa directly, si Company X yung bumili. Sa indirectly, si Company Y. And then, dun sa indirectly kasi, kapag nag-consolidate na ng financial statement, si parent tsaka si subsidiary, lumalabas na yung consolidated financial statement na yon, si Company X as parent, meron siyang significant power kay Company Z dahil doon bumili si Company Y. Kung nalito, pwede nyong ulitin tapos sulat nyo sa papel yung X, Y, Z. Si X si parent, si Y si subsidiary, tapos investee si Z. So in-explain ko lang yung paragraph, tapos ang importante dyan yung 20% or more. Tapos less than 20%. So the threshold is 20%. Kapag ang shares mo ay 9,999 out of 20,000. Basta, let's say ang percentage mo ay 19.99%. So for conservatism, wala pa tayong significant influence kasi we're considering the error na or yung discrepancy na 0.01%. Kasi sabi sa standard 20%. Yan, substantial or majority ownership by another investor does not necessarily preclude an investor from having significant influence. Beyond the mere 20% threshold of ownership, the standard provides that existence of significant influence is usually evidenced by the following factors. Yan, representation in the board of directors. Kung wala pa sa threshold na 20%, pero yung 5 yan, maalin man dyan is nagwo-work out si Company B, balik tayo sa investor-investee, si Company B kay Company A. So, possible na may significant influence. Una, representation in the board of directors. Kapag hinahayaan ni Company A na yung representative ni Company B, usually the president or the chairman of the board, makisali sa board meetings. So, lumalabas din si Company B, although 19% lang yung ownership niya, meron siyang significant influence kasi kasama siya sa decision making. Yan, participation, letter B, self-explanatory. Material transaction between the investor and the investee. Material transaction, let's say, si Company A, so investee na siya, tapos si investor ay si Company B 19%. And then what happened is si Company A, it decided to make its own building or office. And ginawa nila, binili na lang nila kay Company B yung building ni Company B, yung parang building number 2. So, material transaction siya kasi Company A will be operating from at the building na binili niya kay Company B. So, malaking transaction siya, material. Hindi siya basta si A bumili lang ng inventory kay B or vice versa. The interchange of managerial personnel. So, yung parang naghihiraman sila ng managerial personnel, like walang financial analyst si Company B, si Company A pahihiramin ni Company B. So, parang lumalabas na yung personnel nila is nag-sharing sila. And then, yung managerial personnel kasi, sila yung part din sila ng decision making, lalo na sa operation. Kapag operational manager o kaya pag financing manager, accounting manager, so indirectly siya nagiging part ng decision making ng investee. Sa letter E, provision of essential technical information, yung essential technical information, parang nag-share sila ng knowledge about technology, tapos yung mga copyright, trademarks, and then yung sharing of, hindi man knowledge yun kapag company to company, intellectual informations, technical informations, na nakaka-apekto materially sa operation. So, ang lang nito is kapag yung decision making kasali, tsaka kapag material yung exchange nila ng information. Potential voting rights. An entity may own share warrants, debt or equity instruments that are convertible into ordinary shares that have the potential, if exercised or converted, to give the entity additional voting powers over the financial and operating policies of another entity. Ito, bumili ka ng shares pero wala pa siyang voting rights nung binili mo. Potential pa lang siya kasi yung sa share warrants, para kang merong share rights, di ba? You have the right to buy the common shares or other common shares of the investee with a stated price, usually lower than the fair value. Yung debt and or equity instrument, meron kang bonds payable, bonds instrument pala, ikaw yung investor meron kang bond investment, bond certificate na babayaran ni Company A. Tapos sabi ni Company A, pwede mo siyang i-convert to ordinary shares or common shares. So siya ay convertible into ordinary shares. O yung equity instrument mo na nabili is preference share, pero convertible siya, 'di ba? So kapag share warrants, yung may share rights, yung right to buy kapag nag-declare ng rights ng common shares, debt at equity dapat convertible siya into ordinary shares. Kapag sinabing non-convertible, so hindi siya kasali for potential voting rights. So kapag may potential voting rights, the existence of such potential voting rights is considered in assessing whether an entity has significant influence. Okay? The potential voting rights should be currently exercisable or convertible. So dapat within one period or accounting period, naka-stated na convertible yung voting rights, yung share warrants, tsaka yung debt or equity instrument into ordinary shares. Kasi kapag sinabi na convertible siya, after 3 years pa, parang naka-hold yung conversion, hindi siya kasama sa pagbibilang for the voting rights dahil yun nga, at the end of the period lalabas at malaki yung chance talaga na hindi siya mako-convert. Ang investment in associate, ang kino-compute lang natin, ang binibilang natin as numerator na shares is yung common shares. Potential voting rights are not currently exercisable or convertible when rights cannot be exercised until a future date or until the occurrence of a future event. So para ito'y conditional kapag sabi ng investee na mako-convert mo yan kapag nanalo si Senator A sa presidential election, sa presidential position in year 2024. So siya ay non-convertible although 2024 na ngayon kasi may possibility na hindi manalo. So dapat stated yung date, walang condition and walang future event yun condition until a future date. However, when potential rights exist, the investor share a profit or loss of the investee and of changes in the investee's equity is determined on the basis of present ownership interest and does not reflect the possible exercise or conversion of potential voting rights. So, kung mayroon tayong potential voting rights, tapos nag-declare ng income si investee, hindi natin isasama sa pag-compute yung rights. Yung voting rights na posible pa nating makuha. Voting rights or yung common shares na posible pa nating ma-convert into a loss of significant influence. So, 'di ba, nag-a-acquire tayo ng significant influence kapag nakakuha tayo ng participation sa decision making, nagkaroon ng material exchange ng information and personnel, and generally yung 20% threshold. Nagkakaroon din naman ng loss in significant influence una kapag sinabi ni Company A nung investee na wala ka ng significant influence sa amin. So stated wala na. Or from 20% naging 19% na lang kasi nagbenta ka ng shares. An entity loses significant influence when it loses the power to participate in the financial and operating policy decision of the investee. The loss of significant influence can occur with or without change in the absolute or relative ownership interest. Kaya sinabi na pwede siyang with or without change in absolute or relative ownership interest is kapag yung with, ibig sabihin from 20% naging 19%. So nawala agad. Ang without change in relative ownership is yun nga, kapag in-state ni company A na hindi na matutuloy yung transaction na material or explicitly niya sinabi through writing or resolution, board resolution, na si company B wala ng significant influence sa amin. Ang relative ownership interest, yung percentage of interest, 20%, yan. Paano nakukuha yung percentage? So, generally nakukuha siya kung ilan yung hawak mong common shares. Yung present, nasan ba yung present? Ito, present ownership interest mo. Ilan yung common shares mo. Tapos, ilan yung issued common shares ni investee. Yan. The loss of significant, for example, the loss of significant influence could occur when the associate becomes subject to control of a government, court, administrator, or regulator. Si associate is also the investee. Okay? Tayo yung investor. Tapos, ang associate natin is si investee. Kung si investee, si company A, naging GOCC, generally owned and controlled corporation, so ang magkocontrol na sa kanya is government. Hindi na tayo makakakontrol sa kanyang decision making. Nawawala yung ating significant influence. The loss of significant influence could also occur as a result of a contractual agreement. Yan yung parang nag-agree yung si company A, si company B, na si company B wala ng significant influence. Equity method, this is based on the economic relationship between investor and investee. Kapag sa problem, this method is based on economic relationship between investor and investee. So, equity method. Una, dahil pareha silang E, economic tsaka equity. Pangalawa, tinitingnan natin, view natin na si investor at investee ay iisa lamang. Kasi once na kumita si investee, magre-reflect yung kinita niya sa account ni investor. Yan. Plus, meron significant influence over the investee, si investor. Particularly to the economic decision making. Yan. Accounting procedure, investment is initially recorded at cost. Usually yung cost, yan din yung fair value at the time of the transaction. Kasi generally, yung sa stock market, yung publicly held corporation, ang publicly held kasi yung mga bangko na malalaki, tapos si Jollibee, yung mga real estate, si San Miguel, ano pa ba yung malalaking company, si Meralco, yan. Kapag nagbebenta sila ng stocks nila, nakadepende kung ano yung fair value nila at the time ng transaction sa market. Kaya yung cost, minsan, yan na din yung fair value. Okay, halimbawa yung problem, sinabi the fair value at the transaction is 1M. Hindi sinabi yung cost. So, yun na yung iyong initial recognition ng investment. Now, the carrying amount is increased and decreased by the share of profit and loss of the investee respectively. Dahil nga meron tayong economic relationship kay associate natin, kapag kumita siya, kikita din tayo. Kapag nalugi siya, lulugi din tayo na ika-capitalize natin sa ating investment. Yan, yun yung equity method. Isingit ko na kapag cost method, hindi siya nire-record. Okay? Yung cost method, parang i-discuss na naman yun, parang at amortized cost ata. Pero para dito, again, economic, equity method, kikita ka, kikita din ako. Lugi ka, lugi din ako. So, magka-capitalize yung kita at lugi na yon. Investor shares of profit or loss of the investee is recognized as investment income. Diba, ika-capitalize natin siya. So, kung i-capitalize natin siya, magde-debit tayo ng investment in associate. Ang credit natin is investment income. Papasok siya sa profit or loss under other income. Bakit siya under other income? Because these investments, again, are not part of the ordinary course of business ni company. Parang additional source of wealth siya ni company, another source of income. So, other income siya papasok. Tapos, kapag loss, so, debit tayo ng investment loss. Tapos, credit ng investment in associate. Distribution or dividends received from the equity investee reduce the carrying amount of the investment. Unlike net income, net loss, yan ay depende kung kita or lugi. Ang dividends, siya ay automatically deduction. Meron bang reason dito? Why? Kasi si Company A nag-declare ng dividend sa'yo. Particularly, kapag mga stock dividends, ganyan, or cash dividends, papasok siya as bawas sa investment in associate mo. Why? Kasi, si Company A may retained earnings siya. Doon niya kinuha yung kanyang dividends. So, under yung economic relationship, bumaba yung retained earnings ni Company A. So, ang mangyayari, bababa yung value ng equity ni Company B as investor. So, yung dividendo na i-declare ni Company A, nakakababa siya sa investment in associate ni investor. Sorry. So, yon, dividend is deduction. Makikita niyo sa module na yung T-account, diba? Ang equity method, debit side net loss, credit net share in net income, tapos another credit about dividends. Note that, ito importante, nagkakaroon ka na ng investment in associate kapag ang binili mo is ordinary share. Pag binili mo preference share, wala kang i-compute na relative ownership mo kasi wala kang voting rights. So, if the investment is in preference shares, the equity method is not appropriate, regardless of the percentage, because the preference shares is a non-voting equity. Non-voting meaning kapag nagkaroon ng mga decision-making na kailangan ng vote ng mga shareholders, hindi sila kasali. Ang may say lang is mga common shares. Why? Ang rationale, preferred na sila. Kapag kumita yung company, una sila. Kapag nalugi yung company, usually hindi sila naaapektuhan kasi meron silang percentage ng dividend na dapat mabigay sa kanila annually. So, malaki na yung kanilang privileges, yung priority sila. So, yung voting shares usually ay kay common shares. Tsaka yung common shares, siya yung madaming nai-issue na stocks. And investment in preference shares may be accounted for at a fair value through P&L or fair value through OCI. Yan. So, kapag ordinary shares, equity method. Kapag preference shares, yung accounting niyan is yung fair value TPL, fair value TOCI, or at cost. Technically, if the investor has significant influence over the investee is said to be an associate. Accordingly, under the equity method, the investment in ordinary shares should be appropriately described as investment in associate. The investment in associate accounted for using the equity method shall be classified as non-current asset. In-explain ba? Non-current asset siya kasi yung investment in associate, madalas, kaya natin pinapalaki yung ating investment, yung nagiging 20% na yung ownership natin, is makasali tayo sa decision making ni investee. Since kasama na tayo sa decision making, ang ating iniisip ngayon is going concern assumption na si investin natin tuloy-tuloy yung kanyang business. So in reflect pagbalik natin kung paano natin i-record saang account siya. So papasok siya as non-current asset because we are considering na gagamitin natin yung significant influence natin kay associate in the long run as long as company A is still existing. Okay, illustration, cut ko muna.